All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks again for joining. My name is Aaron Goldman. I'm CMO at Mediaocean. Thrilled to be with you for the latest in our Mediaocean current series. This one, of course, is covering our 2025 H2, which stands for second half market research. We've got a great speaker lineup here today. Angelina Eng from the IAB is here. We have Jon Lafayette, who's a great insider covering the space. Shelby Saville from Starcom is in the house. We have Karsten Weide, who's an ad tech analyst. He'll be walking through the research in just a second. And then after Karsten presents the research and findings, we'll have Jon lead a Q&A with Angie to get industry perspective on all the key trends. And then we'll bring up Shelby for a fireside chat, get her take on everything that's going on in the space and what's coming up in the future. And then at the end, I'll have some parting gifts for everyone in the form of links and QR codes where you can download this report and a bunch of other stuff that we've put out recently. All right, so this is the eighth now in our biannual series of reports we've published over the last 4 years. We've gotten over 5,500 respondents to our surveys. I'm sure many of the folks who are watching now live have participated, so thank you for always sharing your feedback. It's a really nice representative sample that we have to work with, and of course now we're able to see some pretty compelling year-over-year trends as we go. The most recent survey was conducted in May, just under 500 marketers who responded, sharing their view on the back half of this year. And as you can see, the data covers marketers in pretty much every vertical. I think 12 different sectors with no one single one being more than 15% of the total. So tech, entertainment, CPG, retail, auto, the top five, each of them just above 10% of total, and then healthcare, FinServe, D2C, telco, travel, QSR, and EDU rounding it out. So excited to get into it. I'm going to hand it off here to Karsten. I'll ask him to turn on his camera while I embarrass him by reading his bio. Karsten has 30 years of experience as a researcher, producer, and product manager in the advertising and media entertainment industries. At his research company, W Media Research, he specializes in ad tech, serving vendors, publishers, agencies, and brands with market intelligence and go-to-market work. Previous engagements include IDC, Yahoo, Ziff Davis. He's a two-time winner of IDC's Research Quality Award, and also the Research Innovation Award and Excellence Award for Business Development. So who better to take you through all the trends than Karsten? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you for having me today. So I'm going to lead you through the results, the top results of our latest survey, and we're going to take it from the top with the top 5 insights. So first overview. First, ad spend is holding strong in spite of the fact that there's volatility in the economy and the industry. Secondly, in terms of strategic priorities, identity and demand generation are rising closer to the top. Number 3, of all the trends affecting our industry, marketers now see AI as the most critical trend even before CTV. Number 4, AI is moving from experimentation into implementation into real workflows. And number 5, CTV is entering a new, more mature phase driven by demands for personalization and by the ability to measuring reach and frequency. Next slide, please. So let's start with spending intent. So the good news is that thank you, Aaron. The good news is that the vast majority of marketers are intending to maintain or increase their advertising spend in the second half of the year. So this slide shows you marketers' intentions to increase, keep the same, or reduce spending for each given major channel. Obviously, there's a lot of information. I'm not going to go into the details of everything here. It's just as a reference for you to go back later. And but what I want to take you through is the top highlights. First, the biggies. That is connected TV. unsurprisingly, the most dynamic segment in the industry. That's simply for two reasons. Number one, there's still about $50 billion sitting in traditional TV, so lots of money ready to be moved into digital. And secondly, for CTV, you have the upsides of both TV, namely a big canvas to tell stories, but also the digital amenities of better targeting and better accountability. Now, interestingly, in past surveys, social media and display and video advertising, they're always the numbers one and two in terms of spending intent, right? So where people wanted to increase spending the most. But interestingly, both of those dropped in interest by 10 points each. So everything was like around 60% of people said we're going to spend more, CTV, social, and display. But now social and display dropped by 10 points to 50. And the reason probably why that is because both social and display, they've been long been near saturated. The economic conditions are such that, there's closer scrutiny on spending and effectiveness. And I think there's also experimentation with AI-based advertising beginning or advertising on AI platforms. So that might be reasons that explain why these have been going down. We also see a sharp decline in search. And that's just simply because I think, traditional search is in trouble because consumers are beginning to vote with their feet. So they're moving to chatbots like ChatGPT or Perplexity AI. And so it's going to be difficult for Google. Now, the penetration is still relatively low. Like 6% of people use ChatGPT or similar sites, but the increase is rapid. So only a few months ago it was only 3%, now it's 6%. So I think adoption will be extremely rapid, probably more rapid than anything else we've seen before in terms of adoption. Retail media holding fast. And then all traditional advertising channels are set to lose attention, as is to be expected. Print for sure, but also national TV and even local TV. So all of these are going to feed mostly into video and CTV. Next slide, please. Which brings us to insight number two. So we're moving on from spending intent to strategic priorities. So we asked, given current macroeconomic conditions, which advertising capabilities and media investments are the most critical for you? And so first, the biggies, performance advertising at the very top. So performance advertising at the very top, brand advertising at the second, and then the ability to measure and attribute. Those remain at the top of the list, have been at the top of the list for a while. So far, so expected. And now let's look at the outliers. This year's survey revealed an increase in the importance of three key capabilities. One is demand generation. The second one is creative testing and analysis. And the third one is identity. So first of all, demand generation. Interest grew by 33%, nearly 8 points more. And I think that it reflects a broader shift to more accountability and more scrutiny on direct financial sales performance. So as opposed to just direct response advertising where you have like this grass fire effect, as long as you spend, there's effectiveness. So demand generation is more about a more sustainable demand that would create a more sustainable, more reliable revenue stream. So that's demand generation. The second one, identity solutions. Search more than 40%, steepest increase across all capabilities. So this connects with the back and forth on whether or not we're going to use or get to use third-party cookies on Chrome and the privacy sandbox. And yeah, we're going to go sandbox. We're not going to go sandbox. We're going to disallow cookies. We're going to allow cookies. So there's simply more interest on everybody's side to look more into identity solutions to get beyond this chaos with the cookies. Interestingly, conversely, privacy as a standalone initiative saw the biggest drop, down 26% in interest. Doesn't mean privacy is ignored, but it does suggest that Google's about face on third-party cookies alleviated some of the compliance concerns that there were. And then finally, we see a big jump in creative testing and analysis. So this loops back to using AI in dynamic creative optimization. So in other words, creating massive amounts of executions, different executions of the same ad. Of course, you don't want beyond that ability to just create thousands of ads. You want the ability to figure out, well, is it appropriate? Is it brand safe? And is it effective, right? So that's why this is important. So next we asked, what are the most important trends that you see in the marketplace? In other words, or maybe translated into when it comes to your advertising business, what are you looking at in terms of advertising capabilities and in terms of media investments? So the two trends marketers think are most essential are AI and CTV. But as opposed to previous surveys, so in previous surveys, what we had was a situation where CTV and AI were basically head-on, basically where they were both equally seen as important by marketers. But now AI is completely outpacing CTV. So it's clearly seen as the top priority. 72% of respondents said that Gen AI is the top trend for them, up 15 points from the last survey. I mean, it's considered so vital for future success that respondents in every single vertical, from automotive to telecom, rank it number one. So it just reflects that marketers have come to understand just how fundamentally transformative AI is going to be. Also remarkable is the decline of importance for the item TikTok/social video. And it loops back to what we've seen before in terms of what are your spending intents. And we saw a decline in interest in social as well there, and social videos there as well. Now, and finally, the last insight here is that all of this is happening against the backdrop of cultural change. So obviously, I've been around. I'm a little older, so I grew up in a business world where one thing was seen as incompatible with business success, and that was politics, and that has really changed. So millennials and Gen Z users, they clearly expect an identity between the business that you run and the morals that you espouse. So there needs to be an identity of the two. So they clearly expect brands to take a stance, on political and cultural issues. So now we've seen that the top two items that marketers are seeing as important are Gen AI and CTV. So now we're going to drill down a little bit more on this. So how are they using Gen AI in marketing? And the top two applications remain analytical, like in the last survey. So it's about data analysis and market research. In other words, it's about measurement and attribution on the one hand, and media planning on the other hand. And right after that, the second set of applications are creative. So that's copywriting, image generation, and then for the first time, we included creative versioning here coming in at 27%, so a quarter of respondents says this is important. Again, this loops back to a DCO, right, where you have tons of executions and you want to figure out if they work or not. And then finally, also website development has jumped up. It's still at the bottom of the list, so close to the bottom of the list, but interest nearly doubled in that. So that's about the random landing page, the random mini website that you have to come up with, the random code that you need to come up with, a random script, all of which can be helped by AI. And that also is beginning to be understood by marketers, which now can use vibe coding basically to come up with those applications more easily and more quickly. Next slide, please. So I'm going to show you a couple of slides now, which are about basically the question, how fast is this change going to happen? So we asked this question first for creative optimization. As you can see, over 80% of respondents think this is going to happen relatively quickly. So, about half say, the change will be moderate at a moderate pace, but nearly a third say it's going to be very rapid. So this is happening. And as a matter of fact, personally, I think this is still too conservative. I think that marketers still underestimate how quickly this is going to happen. But definitely driving home the point, something to be looked at, very important. Next slide, please. And here's a similar example for media planning and buying. Again, 80% expect relatively quick change. Over 50% anticipate gradual change. A quarter expect more rapid change, a dramatic change. Now you'll see that these numbers predict slower change than for creative optimization. I think that's simply because obviously media planning and buying, that's a more complex workflow than creative optimization. All right, next slide, please. Now we're going to look at CTV. So we said Gen AI and CTV are the two most important items. We looked at Gen AI just now. Now let's look at CTV. What are the most important aspects driving full funnel performance in CTV? So first of all, what they want first and foremost is personalization and the ability to measure reach and frequency. So it's really about more, it's like hankering for more control, right? So more control in terms of who can I talk to on CTV, but also more control in terms of what's the outcome. So that's why these two items are at the top. Interestingly, as you know, or may know, there's quite a bit of a push in the CTV segment to use CTV as a direct response advertising channel. In other words, it's not used like traditional TV, basically for brand campaigns, but there's the attempt to use it to drive direct sales. And I've always been a little skeptical about this because the interface is not ideal. So you see something on TV, there's a barcode, you click, and then you have to move to your smartphone, right? Click the barcode, go to the link, open the website, yada, yada, yada. So you can already tell it's a fairly complicated interface, right? That's I think why this is still relatively low at 19%. But I think this may change in particular because of Amazon, because there you have an integration between the shopping platform and the advertising platform. You just click a link on screen and it takes you to the sales page. So that might signal that there will be more interest in this going forward. Now let's drill deeper into a couple of aspects. So number one is we asked what are the most important aspects you look at when you run a campaign on a live sports event on digital? And now, as you know, most live sports are still on cable, but you do see more live sports on digital now on CTV, and we haven't quite reached landslide territory yet, but it's going to come. So eventually, you see a lot of live sports on digital. Anyway, the most important aspects that we're looking at is its reach, its audience reach, the volume of impressions, and the conversion rates. And unsurprisingly, these three items are items that are directly translate into sales performance. That's why these are the top. The following two, engagement time, completion rates, these drive indirect performance, right? So that's why they are lower down. Next slide, please. One other factor that drives performance on CTV, of course, is frequency management, right? If you oversaturate a person or a user with the same ad over and over again, that's just it's just throwing money out of the window, basically, right? So it directly affects performance. So we also want to know what are the biggest challenges you face with frequency management in CTV. The biggest challenges are fragmentation. There's just too many different platforms, and concurrently, of course, data silos across these different platforms. And this explains, of course, limited cross-channel visibility. So in other words, the bottom line here is, as an industry, we have to overcome fragmentation in order to have a more homogeneous ability to run a campaign. And that is it, I think. Let's recap the key insights. One is that the ad spend is going to remain resilient despite economic challenges, by which I mean not just economic challenges at large, but also changes in the industry, rapid changes, disruption, international instability and tensions. But spending intent does not change. Number two, strategic priorities, identity and demand generation are rising to the top. Number three, marketers are doubling down on Gen AI. And number four, they actually are using it in their day-to-day work. No, it's not experimentation anymore, it's real implementation. And finally, number five, personalization and measurement lead the next phase of CTV. And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention. Aaron, back to you.
All right. Thank you, Karsten. Appreciate it. Great crisp take on the trends here. And now we are going to bring up Jon and Angelina for some discussion. I will stop the share and ask you to, oh, you're already up on camera. Great, thank you. So just by way of introductions, first starting with Angelina or Angie or Ange. She's VP Measurement, Addressability, and Data Center at the IAB. Over her career, she's held executive roles at Morgan Stanley, Merkle, Dentsu, and Publicis, helping shape foundational digital advertising practices. She was named a top 2025 Women in Media and Ad Tech Industry Impact honoree by Ad Monsters and Ad Exchanger, and she's also won the IAB Data Rockstar Award, the Ad Monsters Power List, and Digital Media Leadership Award. And she has a great newsletter on LinkedIn called Angie's Career Gazette, so be sure to subscribe to that. And then we have Jon Lafayette, who's been covering the television and advertising business for decades at publications like Broadcasting Cable, Electronic Media, TV Week, and Ad Age. He recently started up Lafayette Media Group, which does consulting and content creation, and he writes about the business for the website The Measure. So be sure to give them a follow. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jon to lead the Q&A with Angie.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you to Mediaocean for sharing this report and the insights that it's revealing. Now, Angelina, the Mediaocean report found that despite concerns about tariffs, inflations, and other political issues, ad spending is surprisingly resilient. These things have been in the news almost daily for months now, giving people in business nightmares. What are you hearing at the conferences, events, and meetings that you attend from folks in the ad business?
Well, first of all, I mean, we just conducted a study called the Digital Video Ad Spend and Strategy Report that is pretty much supportive of the Mediaocean findings. And when it comes to CTV, social video, and digital video, especially, we're seeing that there is resilience, and that based on actual data coming from guidelines and a qualitative study with advertiser perceptions, that those channels spending is up year over year from 2023 to 2024. I believe it rose about 18% for CTV. So we're seeing that all those channels combined, we're going from $63.8 billion to about $72.5 billion in 2025. And within those channels, every single one of those I'll call them channels, formats, whatever you want to call them, we're also continuing to see a rise. So despite the tariffs, despite the economy, buyers are bullish around the CTV environment, regardless of the measurement challenges that we face.
Is that what you hear just from pounding around the industry, from going to events? Are people as upbeat as those IAB study results would seem to be?
I would say, especially shifting dollars or re-looking at their media campaigns and moving dollars from linear into CTV. They're working with the networks, they're working with the, the CTV providers or the Netflixes of the world to really figure out how to allocate spend in places where they can reach audiences. Addressability, targeting, identity are a big focus in terms of being able to specifically, rather than doing a broad sweep network buy or even a cable buy, is how do you package digital and linear combined together and be fluid amongst those different environments.
Are those dollars moving to different media companies, or are they staying with the more traditional media companies? I mean, NBC has Peacock, Disney has Hulu, Fox is starting up their own streaming platform. Are they able to maintain their share of dollars, or are the Netflixes and the Amazons and the Samsungs, everybody else who's jumping into the CTV world sort of more organically getting a larger and larger share of the pie?
The companies that are getting, so we didn't get into specific providers on who they're spending them with. However, the main number one point was the more transparent a partner is in terms of providing data and leveraging identity and first party data on top of that to target a more refined audience are the ones that are seeing the most uplift. So a publisher or a media owner's first party data is pretty much gold. But there are concerns around data clean rooms and privacy regulations and compliance. And so a lot of companies are still navigating those those challenges and trying to keep up. As you know, in the US, we have about 22 state laws. We're nowhere close to a federal regulation. And now with AI, you have data privacy, as well as AI regulations and compliance that are kind of having everyone kind of scratch their heads how to actually operationalize these two various different areas within their own both media and marketing initiatives.
It seems to me that the ability to activate against all of this data, that first-party data that both the media owners have and that the clients themselves have, would favor CTV. Are there things that the traditional media companies can do in terms of being able to target old-fashioned media better in order to sort of hold on to their share of ad dollars and take advantage of the large reach that they still enjoy?
Again, I think it goes back to data transparency and measurement. Companies that are really leaning into things like IAB Tech Labs Conversion API and ASIF are now starting to, there's a little bit more awareness around those two. And if there's an opportunity to have brands and agencies leverage their IAB Tech Labs Conversion API to share outcomes data with the media owner, but that will enable them to have better insights into what's working and what's not working. They're really interested in leaning in those companies. So ASIF, if anyone's familiar with ASIF is, what we used to call the universal ad ID. And that is going to be critical regarding reach and frequency, enabling CTV providers to understand when they have different ads and by an advertiser and is running across multiple inventories to identify that specific creative unit and what that frequency of that creative unit is. The conversion API as I kind of hinted, is the opportunity for brands and agencies through an API, send that data over to the publishers and enable them by placement, by audience, to optimize campaigns off of outcomes which you would typically not see in a last touch attribution. And as you know, or as many of you know, trying to attribute outcomes to CTV and streaming video is very challenging.
So yeah, let's get into that challenge a little bit. Are there ways that these marketers are able to look at the data and figure out how much of these sales are attributed to the brand marketing that they're doing, whether it's with CTV or with another channel, versus the more transactional forms of media where you can click to buy or click to add it to your shopping cart?
Yeah, so we're moving into a stage in our industry where that data is available in terms of the data is there, right? It's the attribution model that is really the challenge.
Right.
And we just hosted the IAB Measurement Leadership Summit and the Video Leadership Summit a few weeks ago here in New York in Glen Cove. And what was very interesting was that we talked about last touch attribution a lot, and how do we move away from last touch attribution? And I think that what you're going to hear from IAB and myself is that we shouldn't be relying on last touch, but maybe perhaps move towards assisted attribution, right? And that will allow companies to understand when an ad is exposed to a user, what the potential impact it has in driving towards those conversions. And if we can get the ad servers and the DSPs and any other measurement solution provider to provide assisted attribution as side by side to a last touch attribution, then you're going to start to see a shift in where marketers are now more informed about what's working and what's not working.
So, but the bottom line on this whole thing is look how people are looking at CTV. I think in the study we heard that a lot of marketers are looking at CTV as a performance marketing vehicle. But I'm hearing more and more that people are trying to figure out how to use CTV to also do brand building. Where do you think marketers are going to come down in terms of using this channel as more and more money gets spent there and the research gets better and better?
So again, I'm going to go back to that assisted attribution, because if you start seeing that if a user was exposed to an ad on CTV, but it did not drive the last touch attribution, but it contributed to that outcome, then what we hope to see is marketers start seeing the value or weight the value of those environments that currently don't get the attribution, right? So hopefully at some point, if we can move the industry towards moving away from the way that they're measuring campaigns now and looking at full funnel and attributing appropriately what the role of each channel is, then I think we're going to start seeing a shift. But the first thing is exposing the data to the brand, to the agencies, so that they can make those decisions. But right now, it's really difficult to do that, especially given, earlier we talked about fragmentation, siloed data. I'm hoping that in 2020, between now and 2026, how do we harmonize data? How do we compare performance across different channels, across different platforms, across different devices, where it can feed the model? And this is where AI is going to have a big impact as well. In our IAB State of Data report that we conducted earlier this year, we surveyed buyers, agencies, brands, agencies, and publishers on their use of AI in the media campaign lifecycle. And audience segmentation rose to the top as number one for every single one of those partners, but solving for measurement was also the other. So moving away from deterministic data to probabilistic data, but with caution, right? Because with AI, there could be bias. They can't, you need to really train the models to look at entire holistic trends versus, again, that last touch performance.
So let's talk a little bit more about AI, which is something the whole industry does seem to be talking about. One issue for targeted media is the cost of creating targeted messaging. It doesn't make much sense to focus on an audience segment if your creative isn't geared to that same segment. Is generative AI lowering that barrier, and how are advertising deploying AI-generated ads?
All right, so especially in the CTV environment,
Yes.
our study showed that nearly 9 in 10 digital buyers are either using or planning to use AI for video ad creative. That is huge, especially given the fact that if any of you know me, I come from an ad ops background, and dynamic ads has been around for a really, really long time, over 20 years. But what I'm finding is that, or have found over the years, that not enough brands and agencies are creating dynamic ads. And with the use of AI, it's going to make it even that much better. And I think that the industry needs to look at where can they find efficiencies, and how do they leverage data to really create ads that are relevant to users based on either contextual signals, behavioral signals, what types of cohort they belong to, time of day, day of week, geo location data, as well as what's happening from a geopolitical perspective in the world, right? And if you layer on all of those different elements to feed an AI model, you are going to build out very effective creatives. Now, I should say, you should be able to create effective creatives. There's also got to look at the creative agency and if they're doing their job or not. But the idea of personalizing ads is very powerful and very effective. And I've experienced it even when dynamic ads were, at its basic. When I was running Home Depot and Macy's, we were using dynamic ads to provide offers and swap out creatives in a timely manner, and not have to create and upload 150 creative assets at a time, right? We did it with 3 templates and rotated in over 1,500 messages at any given time. So I think AI is just going to make it even more powerful, and creative agencies should embrace it, right? This will allow them to be more strategic, think about the consumer, even from the lens of the consumer, rather than from a production standpoint. And how much does it cost? Because producing ads can be quite expensive.
I think the other big concern about AI is how it's going to affect jobs. How will the jobs in the advertising business be affected by AI?
So the State of Data report stated that most people were not concerned about job loss, but that was conducted way back in November, December of 2024. And we did a quick pulse in Q1 as well. Lots have changed. A lot of things have evolved. It's hard to say, but what I will tell you is that AI alone cannot power our industry, and it requires human oversight, intervention, as well as guidance, right? There's something about, where I believe, something about experience that needs to come into play. There are factors that are not typically taken into consideration in a lot of these models. And so therefore, people need to evolve in terms of their skill sets of utilizing them as tools, but not as complete solutions.
Gotcha. Well, I think we're out of time. I see Aaron's popped up back onto the screen. Thank you very much, Angelina, for your thoughts, and back to you, Aaron.
All right, thanks, John, and thanks, Angie. Yes, the fire's roaring, which means it's time to bring Shelby up. Um, we don't need much of a fire here. We're both in the Chicago area, and it's plenty warm outside. But if you've got air conditioning going, you can curl up next to the logs here. And welcome. Thank you for being here. How's your summer going?
Thanks for having me. It's going great. I am laughing though because you have a fire and I have a dark background. I feel like we're in fall already. But summer's great, crazy, busy, going way too fast. But yeah, as hot as can be, as hot as the fire behind you.
There you go, indeed. Well, I won't do the formal full bio and intro here. I feel like a lot of folks probably know you in the industry, but just in case, Shelby is CEO at Starcom. Actually, you and I first met, I think it was probably 2000, and it was Starcom IP when this thing called the internet was just taking off, and Starcom had created a group to tackle that, and you were leading clients into that brave new age. And now here we are some 25 years later, and the next brave new age is upon us with AI. So I know that's going to be one of the big topics that we get into. But maybe let's just start more narrow. The research we talked about was focused on the second half of this year. There's a lot of macro conditions and variables in play. So how would you characterize things, and how are you thinking about this, the second half of the year? What's top of mind?
Yeah, I mean, what's top of mind for me is really working closely with our clients on what their goals are for the second half as well as next year. And it continues to just be a volatile time to be in business. Like disruption is everywhere. Consumer behavior, we always talk about like, oh, it's changing rapidly. Like, I don't think that change is ever going to slow down. So this general volatility and unrest continues. And it's not to be doom and gloom about it. It just means like you've got to approach it with an agile mindset of, what do we need to do today? What is the client needing today and tomorrow? But, it's a tough time to be a client, and it's an interesting time to try to think through a marketing and media plan in a business and an industry and a consumer dynamic that makes it very hard to plan, very long ranging. So, for people like me, I think it's a challenge and I really like it, but it makes it very difficult at many times.
Yeah. And so what do you hold as the North Star, or maybe put a different way, like what more than anything are clients kind of asking for you and looking for you as as their partner right now?
Yeah, I mean, they're really looking for how do you balance that? What is the long range need that a brand has and a business has with what are pivots and big bets you need to make today? So, how are you going to drive that short term return with a eye to the long term of the health of the business? And that balance is difficult. And then a lot of the topics I already talked about in terms of the changing consumer behavior on different platforms and what are they doing? What do you care about? And then all the things Angelina and Jon talked about as you think about AI. So how is that thinking about not just what's happening with consumers on our business, but how we run our business, how we interface and create things for and on behalf of clients? Like, how is that changing? And so they're really just looking for someone who can help both guide them through it, but also just be with them through it and help them on the big decision making. And then if that decision was a good decision, how do you just accelerate and scale that? And then if that's something you need to pivot, how do you do a quick pivot and make a big bet that's also has some safety in that big bet?
Yeah, right on. And I want to pull at that thread a bit more, but maybe first, let's talk about so back to the research. We saw sort of the channel mix in sort of where, from a media and ad spend perspective, budgets are going. I guess just sort of open ended. Like, what do you make of that? How are you thinking about the channel mix?
Yeah, what's interesting to me is that within that mix, where you're seeing a lot of increases, is very heavy video. And we've talked a little about, Aaron, and you and I have talked about how every channel seems to be morphing into itself. So where you had these channels, it was like it was video, or it was audio, or it was a more visual meeting. They're all kind of coming together. And so podcasting is becoming video, and then some platforms are realizing that people want to listen to video on their mobile device while commuting with only listening to the audio. So they're almost treating some video like a podcast. And so it's just interesting to me that although we see movement in consumer behavior, when you think about the general form factors of media. You're seeing a heavy tip to video in terms of what marketers are looking for, to just capture that attention, sight, sound, motion, emotional reaction from a consumer. And I think that it's just interesting to me how much everything is tipping to heavy, heavy video formats.
Yeah, and so the imperative then becomes thinking about things sort of from an omni-channel perspective, having sort of these maybe specialist silos that served us well when channels are more emerging. At some point, they sort of cross over and need to become part of the whole. If you think back to where we first met in an era of like a Starcom IP, it made sense to have a separate digital group. And then when search came online, it made sense to have a separate search group, and you all built SMG search and on as new channels and formats proliferated. But then at some point they mature and you sort of bring them back into an omni-channel sort of planning and approach. So I'm curious, like, how do you balance that? How do you take sort of that need for specialization and deep understanding around certain channels, but then also the need to kind of be consistent across them all?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why when you think about the talent makeup of our teams, it's an and. Like you have specialists and you have people who are thinking about the broad omni-channel strategy. And really, it means that we start with identity and audiences, because you really have to start with who are you going after? How many of them do you need? What do you need to drive your business? What is it going to take to actually move their behavior in the direction that you need to help drive business? You have to start with that, not start with the channel first. And sometimes it can feel really easy to say, oh, we're going to do a big splash in video, for example, or we've got this new big creative. But if it didn't start with consumer behavior, consumer understanding, down to identity audiences, so you actually know how you can directly find them with all of the tools that we have across every single channel to really drill down to specific identities, and then use things like personalized messaging. You're really staying probably too blunt with what you can do in media. And you're probably losing some understanding of some areas that you can really find pockets of the customers that you're trying to drive by going to broad channel first. So we always just push very heavily for identity and audience first, and then from that, really determining what is the best mix to find them.
Yeah. So two things can be true at the same time. You can sort of specialize it and build for that while also staying true to the consistent perspective, audience first. I'm curious how. So where does AI factor in? You talk about talent and how you organize. Now with AI coming into play, I'm curious how you let's look at that from sort of two lenses. One is just sort of like general adoption and how AI is helping drive better outcomes, but then also how is that changing how you think about running your agency?
Yeah, and when you think about AI as it relates to driving outcomes and performance, I mean, AI and automation are things that we've been using for many, many years in order to do that. Many, many, but in this world, many, many. And so that has been something that, where it's available inside of a platform or inside of technology, I think we've absolutely been adopting as fast as possible. I think as we start to think about the complexity around media planning and buying and trying to mine for the right scalable identity audiences, the ability to put AI on top of audience planning and understanding how to drive that momentum and how to do that quickly and how to understand micro audiences, the ability to have AI do that quicker than we could ever do it manually is really, really exciting. But Angelina said it really well. I think everyone's all in on AI, but you need to take a little bit of a measured approach to make sure that you are thinking about it, that you are training for it, that you are really going smartly into it. Because I don't think, although the promise is this is going to take every workflow and just do it with a push of a button. We've seen that before. Anytime we go into platform media, anytime we went into a new media choice, we say, okay, well, now it's just going to not be people and we can just push a button and everything's going to happen. I think AI has more promise to automate and accelerate a lot of the things that we're doing. It's still going to need a lot of human oversight. Therefore, talent-wise, what we're looking at a lot is how do we put all of these AI tools in the hands of our talent immediately and start to really understand and train and think about the impact of AI instead of having a gradual impact. What is the like immediate impact that it can have? For twofold. One is to be quicker, faster, more agile for clients. The second is to really have an understanding of what does the talent need today and in the future as you are putting talent and humans on top of these tools or working even alongside these tools. How do you think about what is that talent makeup of the future? Because I think it's really about, again, a different upskilling and specialization of talent versus not needing talent, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And thinking back on the research, there's definitely like for both questions, how will AI impact? We asked first for creative optimization and second for media planning and buying. And both, more than half said it'll be gradual. But to your point, that doesn't mean there's not stuff that can and should be done today.
Right.
And also, to be fair, this is a self-reported survey, right? So there's oftentimes
Yeah.
kind of a say-do gap. I mean, we saw that with when Karsten touched on the top use cases for AI. A lot of people, say they're doing it to, create their ads and do all their copywriting, but then you see the top two use cases are actually market research and data analytics. So
Yeah.
important things to keep against the backdrop with all the hype in market. All right, let's switch gears. CTV was another thing that popped off after AI. CTV was the second largest consumer trend that people were paying attention to. So, how are you thinking about that opportunity? Why are you seeing that channel grow so fast? And maybe what what opportunities or challenges do you see related to the CTV space?
Absolutely. So CTV, I think, we talked before about how video formats are definitely getting a high priority with marketers. And you think about CTV being delivered in the biggest glass in the household and the most similar, maybe lean back environment, although we know that the media multitasking where people, have a TV on and they have their other device in their lap and they have their mobile phone. So although it's lean back, it's still a very dynamic medium. So we're seeing that CTV is also being used many times for replacement for what was linear television, or it's really become television. So it is kind of funny when we talk about linear TV versus CTV, because to the consumer, they don't think about, oh, I'm watching something on linear, I'm watching something on CTV. They're thinking, I want to sit down and watch something on my television set. So it really is the new television. And what's interesting to me is even looking at the research, the big reasons people are using CTV, it's really about the reach of an audience. And then the other one was incremental reach. And then the other one was personalization, which is really about getting the right message, reaching the right person. So even though there's a lot of different functionality you could do within CTV around things like direct buying and whatnot, it's still primarily being used very heavily as a reach vehicle to get to people inside of a household at the mass number in the pressure time that you need to drive a business result. So it's interesting to me that it really is right now a step replacement for reach and getting to, I'll say mass reach, but I mean mass reach today, which is just getting to the pressure point you need in an audience. The hardest part though is the fragmentation in CTV is insane and very, very difficult if you are not looking at that to make sure that you're not just hitting the same household over and over and driving your frequency way up. And although there are many tools around frequency management, they tend to work within their own ecosystem of supply sources. And so you might frequency manage on one set of supply and then the second set you're not. So it's basically hitting the same people over and over. We had to develop a solution that we call Lift, which was just basically taking a lot of different supply sources from major networks to apps and CTV, harmonizing all of those, and then being able to put identity on top of them to make sure that we were being able to scale that reach and minimize frequency to actually get to business results we needed on CTV, because once we went into that environment, the fragmentation just made it very hard to get demonstrable business results in the beginning around CTV, the way you could in linear, which we know is declining so rapidly that it is really the minimal part of TV these days.
Yeah, yeah, and harmonizing, good choice of words. That's something we think a lot about. Of course, Innovid with its Harmony initiative is
Yeah.
really about being able to think across the supply sources and manage that incrementality. So
Yeah.
I think that's a great place for us to end. We could go probably through all 4 seasons here, but we will put a pin in it for now. Shelby, thanks so much for being here and sharing some of your insights.
Thank you.
And I am going to close us down now with just a few final words. And as I mentioned, some parting gifts. So here's a QR code to get a link to the full report. We've also dropped links in the chat already for the IAB reports. And we'll drop this one in here so that you can get all the research we just went through and some stuff that we didn't go through today. And then keep an eye out over the next couple of weeks. We're going to be publishing vertical reports asked all the same questions, but breaking out the data by sector so you can see what's popping in CPG, entertainment, FinServ auto, retail, telco, pharma. So keep an eye out for these. And just want to quickly go through some of the announcements we've had over the past 6 weeks or so. It's been a very busy stretch for us at Mediaocean and our family of brands. So we, in fact, we put out 13 announcements in just June alone, and have had a couple more since. I'm not sure if anyone listens to the Open Market podcast, but we're sponsoring it now and having Joe Zappa, who's the host, read the headline from each one, and giving him some creative license to do it in his own style. So be sure to check that out. You can also use the QR code here for any of the ones that might interest you. Again, across the family of brands, we've been doing a lot to innovate and push and market. With Prisma, we actually collaborated with Angelina and her team at the IAB on a new invoice API spec. So definitely check that out. Collab with Snowflake and Axiom for Prisma to make data available in client dashboards. Of course, we announced the promotion of Ramsey McGrory to president of Prisma. I'm so excited about that. We have executive promotions for Drew Kane and Steph Dorman. And then actually one that was both across Prisma and Innovid was the partnership with PMG to put our platforms in their new Alley marketplace. But wait, there's more. On the Innovid side of the house, we have a partnership with LinkedIn for CTV. We were talking about Harmony. We've now unveiled Harmony for social, so you can measure cross-platform frequency inside the walled gardens and across open web, CTV, and linear. We had a feature beat for retail media, certainly a lot of energy around that space, a partnership with Affinity Solutions to bring outcomes data into Innovid XP, another measurement partnership with SiriusXM for audio, and then we just sponsored a report on CTV measurement with SIM as well, so check that out. And bringing it home, integration with Disney Compass for measurement. We're part of a new CTV report with the VAB. We were named a leader in the Spark Matrix for ad tech by QKS, and one of the first ad tech partners for Threads by Meta. So a lot popping there. And then a little internal brag, we won the Top Workplaces Award in New York for the 3rd year in a row. So testament to our team, our clients, and our culture of innovation. So thank you all for your support. Appreciate everybody joining us here today. Thanks again to our speakers, Karsten, Angie, Jon, and Shelby. And we hope to see you again soon on another Mediaocean webinar. Take care.